How would anybody ever think that Cowdery the scribe and Young the successor would stand together on the platform and expose the whole thing as fraudulent? Here we are. The irony of God is remarkable. Now, this story is coming out in a book called Who Really Wrote the Book of Mormon? So the story is like a detective tale. So what I'm going to do is to let you go through years of research in just minutes and arrive where they have arrived. We have a surprise guest today we didn't know about. We're going to introduce him a little bit later on. But these three men are here. Now, let me have them share with you the great research project that brought them to where they are at the present moment. This much background I can give you. Joseph Smith Jr.'s revelation was questioned very early by people who said it sounded very familiar. They said they'd heard it before, and then they identified the source. They said that they had heard it from the writings of a retired Congregationalist minister. And from that point on, these gentlemen will pick up the thread. Howard, would you step forward? Dr. Howard Davis is a researcher, co-author of this new book coming out. And I'd like him to share with you for a few minutes just how they found the Book of Mormon document. And we're going to show you a picture of it just in case you or the Mormon Church thinks we're joking. It is no joke. It's here, right in this building tonight. And that's an historic moment. 147 years afterwards, we have it. Howard, share with us.
I used to read some of Dr. Martin's books, one of them being The Kingdom of the Cults and Maze of Mormonism. And in his writings and in his public lectures, Dr. Martin made the assertion that a retired Congregationalist minister by the name of Solomon Spaulding wrote what is now known the world over as the Book of Mormon. The latter part of 1974, I decided to engage in a research project to determine whether or not Dr. Martin's assertions were correct. At the first part of the year, January of 1975, I met Wayne Cowdery in this research project. Later on, Don Scales joined us as a team. We began writing letters all over the United States and the world. We began going to some of the best libraries that we could at that time. Bancroft Library up in Berkeley has an excellent collection on early Mormon documents. So we went there. And as we began progressing, the Mormon people began to put a great deal of pressure on Wayne. And Wayne had studied or had read the Book of Mormon and finally came to the conclusion at that time in his life that the Book of Mormon was of God. He received the burning of the breast, as the Mormon calls it, or the fluttering of the heart, or the warmth of the Holy Spirit. And by this expression, he felt that the Book of Mormon was a work of God. So, Wayne was baptized into the Mormon Church. Of course, Wayne being a great celebrity amongst them, being a descendant of Oliver Cowdery, the second elder of the Mormon Church, as well as scribe to the Book of Mormon. December of 75, I went up to Berkeley to visit my parents. And while at the Bancroft Library, I was studying portions of Solomon Spaulding's manuscript story. This was a manuscript that Mr. Spaulding had written around 1809 in Ohio. It was his first attempt at writing a history of the ancient inhabitants of this country. And I wasn't that much impressed with it. It did not seem, at first glance, to resemble passages from the Book of Mormon. I went home, and a Xerox copy of the book was finally procured by Don and myself. We began examining it in the light of the Book of Mormon. We bought a Book of Mormon concordance, and we began analyzing all the various passages between both productions using the scientific, literary, comparative method to see if there was a singular author in both productions. I tabulated over 100 of them, even though the Mormon Church officially has declared there's not one sentence, not one word that is common to both productions. And as Mr. Cowdery said in his excommunication trial, that's correct. There isn't one. There are hundreds. And the bishop, who was a trial lawyer by profession, became infuriated. And both of his counselors were looking at him, and Mr. Cowdery was sitting there very stern and adamant. And he began lowering his posture. And Wayne went on to assert that there are indeed hundreds of parallels between the manuscript story, which is the known novel by Solomon Spaulding, as it compares with the so-called sacred work called the Book of Mormon. After I tabulated 100 of these parallels and I sent them to Mr. Cowdery, upon receipt of that letter, he called me immediately. He said, "Is this correct?" I said, "Yes, it is. I'm coming right over." And that night, we stayed up a good part of the night examining these parallels, and Wayne was shocked. They had told him that all it was a book on Indians, that nothing in Solomon Spaulding's manuscript story related to the Book of Mormon. So therefore, he could not have possibly been the author to the Book of Mormon. And so Wayne left the church. He was summoned to an excommunication trial and was found guilty and excommunicated from the Mormon church, of course, at his request. And then we began to delve into obtaining some known samples of Solomon Spaulding's handwriting. Mrs. Cowles, who's the chief cataloger at Oberlin College in Ohio, where the manuscript story is now presently on deposit, sent us a Xerox of a letter and some other material written by the hand of Solomon Spaulding. We began to avidly study every portion of this handwriting, the lineal base pattern, the proportionate height between letters, the spaces between words, etc. So we've become so familiar with his handwriting that if we saw it in a manuscript that paralleled the Book of Mormon, the coveted manuscript found, we could immediately identify it, or at least it would be recognizable to us, and we could do further research on that paper. February of 1975, due to an erratic schedule and not eating properly and some of the things I told everybody else to do, I fell ill. And I looked at a book that had a picture in it of an old manuscript in the lower right-hand corner. And as I began analyzing that manuscript, it looked like Solomon Spaulding's handwriting. I began checking the various comparisons between both specimens. And they looked so much alike. I called Mr. Scales up and he examined them. He had studied Spaulding's handwriting for countless hours. And we got out a magnifying glass and began looking at it. And it looked so much like Solomon Spaulding's handwriting. So, in time, we found out that that was a photo reproduction of a manuscript sheet now housed in the archives of the LDS Church at Salt Lake City, Utah, at the Church History Department.
I think it's very important for this point to be made right here. This manuscript he found was not something that was dug up in a trunk somewhere, not a possible forgery, but it was published by the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints, and they said it was an unknown scribe. They never checked the handwriting against Solomon Spaulding. What happened was they were holding the documents in their own archives and protecting them for us, and they never even knew they had them. I'd like Howard to share about what happened when he discovered this particular thing.
Once again, after finding out what that manuscript was, we immediately began to write the LDS Church Historians Department asking for photo reproductions of the original Book of Mormon. They sent us some Xerox sheets, and as we began studying, especially BYU Studies, spring of 1970, by Mr. Dean C. Jesse, we found that that portion was written by an unidentified scribe, some 12 sheets. And it made us indeed very suspicious, but being researchers, we have to be very objective, and we began prying and studying. First of all, we even took the way the unidentified scribe began to, the way he spelled words. Very, very peculiar. And Mr. Cowdery tabulated all of the misspelled words in the known production of Solomon Spaulding, the manuscript story. And they were identical. And then we decided that a handwriting expert or a document examiner must be called in to examine these two documents.